I think it's time to start talking about what can be done rather than just condemning it, because condemning it and condemning it, it ends up being, I think war is a terrible thing. Do you know what I mean? So what can be done? I think there are two things. I think closing stadiums would work. They missed a trick in Spain 2 years ago when Iñaki Williams was racially abused in a game between Athletic Club and Espanyol at Espanyol Stadium. He got taken off in the second half because of that daft rule that you can't just go off where they always have gone off. You have to go off at the nearest point. He had to walk all the way around the stadium. And when he walked behind the goal, he was racially abused. Now La Liga is still pursuing the culprits, and I think, in fact, last week there was a breakthrough, and it's been accepted by the Spain's Crown prosecution. So that's kind of ongoing. But that was the opportunity for the anti-violence committee to say, right, Espanyol, you play a game behind closed doors. It's completely unacceptable. If you are not able to keep your fans under control and to prevent this from happening, then you pay the penalty. And people argue against that and say, well, that's punishing everyone when there were 3 or 4 culprits. But it's the only thing, it's the only way I think that will get changed, because once you start punishing the clubs, once the clubs miss out on a match day and all the income that comes with that, you watch how quickly they clamp down and they fine those responsible and ban them for life. It'll happen a lot quicker than it's happening now. I know that Atletico Madrid have announced a statement this week, or released a statement this week saying, well, we've banned over 50 individuals in recent years. Well, that whole process that needs to happen would happen a lot quicker if the clubs were actually being hurt in the pocket. And it also sends out the right message, because all the time the authorities don't take it seriously. And you see that with the fines that are handed out, then the people responsible won't take it seriously either, and it will continue. The other thing I think that can happen that will help eradicate it is, I think players have to speak out more. I was surprised in the immediate aftermath of what happened on Sunday that there were no Atletico Madrid players taken to social media and saying, I've just seen the disgraceful video. These idiots don't represent our club. They've disrespected our club. They've disrespected the black players that we have, Jeffrey Kondogbia, Thomas Lemar, etc. I didn't see a single tweet from anyone. I know that Cunha was upset, but that was more a thing about don't blame Koke, blame the media. Players have huge power. Not Nike and Adidas throw millions at these players so that they wear their boots, because they know that if player X wears those boots, then they'll sell millions more of them. So the power that players have can't be underestimated. And I grew up going to football in England in the 80s when racism was far worse than it is now in Spain. I remember Man City goalkeeper Alex Williams receiving terrible abuse. It just happened every single week. And so I've been trying to think this week, what happened in England to make it change, because it did change. And in the course of that decade, from when I started going in the late 70s, early 80s to the end of the 80s, the change was remarkable. And I think one of the key things was players. And it was players from the club that I supported coming out and saying, when you do this, you're doing it to us as well. You're doing it to me, you're doing it to my teammates. And I think, maybe this is just me being too kind towards people. I think in every crowd of the Espanyol thing was different, because that was 4 individuals shouting abuse at Iñaki Williams. But when you have a crowd doing the monkey giant, I always think you've probably got 10 hardcore racists in there. You've probably got 10 people who have got fascist, Nazi beliefs. You've also got 90 idiots who are just doing it and they're not thinking about it and they think it's a joke. And I think when they're made to see, because when we talk about people need to be educated, what do we mean by that? Do we mean that you need to be taught peace and love at school, and then you won't go to football stadiums and do this kind of thing? I think it's more specific than that. I think a lot of people, certainly that were doing it in the 80s, would come up with in England would come up with the excuse, well, You know, I mean, if the opposition centre forward's a bit overweight, then I'm going to call him a fat bastard. If he happens to be a different colour to me, I'm going to use that. And those people had to be educated that it's not the same. Now, why is it not the same? Well, it's not the same because fat people have never been enslaved. Fat people have never been colonialised. Fat people have never been denied the vote. There's never been an apartheid against fat people. It's not the insult itself. It's everything else that it represents. And most people, when they reach that understanding, will change their behaviour. And I know that that's true because I experienced it firsthand, standing on the terraces for 10 years supporting my football team. Now, then you've got to deal with the other 10 in the 100 that are not doing it through ignorance. They're doing it because of what they are, and they need to be kicked out of football and stopped from going to football matches. And it's not difficult to identify them. The ones at Atletico, you can usually identify them because they're doing Nazi salutes during games. So they're easy to pick out. And that brings me back to the first point about punish the clubs, hit them where it hurts, and they'll soon enough find the people that they need to get rid of. Barcelona have done it. Real Madrid have done it. Atletico Madrid, very slow in doing it. They say they're doing it. And I think if you go down those two routes of actually punishing football clubs and also players speaking out. And by the way, one more thing before I shut up. Great to see the Brazilian players coming out and defending Vinicius. Let's hope in the coming months that we don't see one of them supporting Bolsonaro, and maybe even go further than that and let's have it using their platform to criticize what he's doing in Brazil. Because you can't separate what's happening politically in a country or what's happening politically in the world with the way that behavior goes. And the best example of that is in England, because racist abuse was pretty much eradicated 100% in England. And over recent seasons, it's come back. And that just happens to coincide with the most toxic and racist government that the country's had, probably in my living memory. So, you know, there are things that can be done. And I think the Anti-Violence Committee is due today or tomorrow because La Liga can't take the action, as I understand it. They give all the evidence, the audio and the video evidence, and it's a state organization, the Anti-Violence Committee, that sits and I'm sure that there'll be a fine of a completely insignificant amount. And all the time it's not taken seriously in terms of the punishments, and it won't be taken seriously by the perpetrators.